Just three ordinary guys trying to understand the crazy world around them. We don't have all the answers, but we've got all the questions. You're listening to Just Add Bourbon with Jimmy, JD, and Brad.
This is Jimmy Don Kerr.
I'm Brad Broaddus.
And I'm J.D. Damon.
And this is the Just Add Bourbon podcast. This show is going to be a little different, guys, than our normal show. There's a topic that the three of us have been wanting to talk about, and we're going to do a series on this particular topic, and that is the opioid epidemic that is ravaging the United States, as well as our little hometown here, Eastern Kentucky and Martin County. And we're going to be doing a series, what we hope to be a series of interviews with some different people whose lives have been affected by this. And so, guys, we'll kind of start the conversation. And I know that everybody sitting in here has been affected in some way or another by the opioid epidemic and, drug use. And we wanted to sit down and just kind of talk about this because we all three think it's really important. I know it's affected me personally. I've had a family member who has struggled with addiction and, as a matter of fact, is actually on the run from the law right now due to that addiction. We've all had friends pass away who have overdosed. It's ruined their lives, lost their jobs, their homes, their families, all due to this addiction. Guys, I think where we want to start it is let's start at the beginning. Why is this such an issue for people? And I think we could talk about that from two different perspectives. We can talk about it from the perspective of nationally, and then here locally, why this has become such an issue.
It's a simple question you asked, but I think the answer is pretty complicated. It's a big web that's been weaved by a lot of people, but when you get down right to it, it's the same thing we say about a lot of subjects. Follow the money. I think you see the worst people come out when it comes to the money for some reason. I think it just brings out the worst in you. Whether those are companies, whether those are individuals, but follow the money. Why we're here where we are today as a nation, man, because they're so accessible.
They're very accessible.
I've never taken an opioid that I can think of. But I could go get them right now if I wanted them. I mean, I can get in my car and go get them. Now, who's to blame for that? Is it the pharmaceutical companies? Is it the doctors? Is it the drug dealers around here? Is it I don't know. Is it the companies these people work for, they need something so they're able to perform their jobs? And I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, to all the above, right?
Yeah.
I think one thing that is different with this epidemic, even just with drugs, you see different things with crack and with cocaine and things that affect different communities. But this is something that's really impacted middle-class America more than anything else. I've got a few years back, I did the eulogy for one of my best friends. And, it was, he came from the family. I mean, he came from the Cleavers. He wasn't neglected, didn't have a bad childhood. He had family that supported him, parents just like mine. And so you wonder how do you get from there to there? Because, you see this so much where the families feel guilty for what they have done or what they haven't done. And I think this is a whole different animal that we're dealing with, mainly because the reason, even if you go from just the pills, that are prescribed into the heroin, I think most places, like 8 out of 10 people originally started with the opioids because they were prescribed from a doctor. So who, as you're growing up as a child, who do you respect more than anybody else, right? For most people's homes, it's your teacher, it's your pastor, and it's your doctor. So you go in the doctor's office, you trust them. They give you this medicine. That's where a lot of people start. And I don't just want to put the blame on the doctors. I think there's a lot of blame to go around. But I think this is something we deal with. It so much of it is on And I agree. There's personal ownership with a lot of these things. I'm not trying to say that nobody is responsible for the things that they do or the medicines they take. But we're not talking about, in most of these cases, where you're at a high school party and somebody walks in with a bag of meth or walks in with heroin and a needle and says, do this. We're talking about something that you go to one of the top 2 or 3 people that you trust the most on the planet, and they say, no, you take this. This is going to be okay, and that's where it starts. What do you guys think?
Well, I think, and I'll talk about this a little more from a local perspective, and then we can kind of jump into the other areas where this, where it's affected. Where we live, it's a coal mine community. That has been our main source of industry for years. And it's hard, back-breaking work. As a matter of fact, JD himself is a coal miner. That is the industry. And these guys work underground. It has a hard impact on their body. And when they get hurt, they will go to the doctor and they'll be prescribed these opioids. And they're taking it for the pain because they're hurt. But they're so addictive that while they're taking it, it starts out for the right reason. They're hurt. They need some pain relief. They're taking it. It becomes something much, much more. I don't know how many people I know in our little community. I think there's 12 to 14,000 people in Martin County. How many people I know that were coal miners that turned out to get addicted to these pills. And it wasn't, like I said, it started out completely innocent. They got hurt. But then they couldn't get off of them. I mean, I'll tell you, one of the best people I know, it's a family member, preaches, was in the mines, got hurt, can't get off of them. Now, it doesn't affect his everyday life. He still preaches every Sunday, but he cannot live without those pills.
Well, he probably has a prescription he keeps getting filled for him.
Mm-hmm.
But now, what I've seen, in the worst cases I've seen, is people getting prescribed these drugs. They take the drugs, they recover from the injury, and now they run out of that prescription. So now what do they turn to? The streets. And they turn to these, the meth, which is opiate. And then they ruin their lives, guys, because they have to have that pill.
Yeah, their life becomes about getting the next pill.
The next pill. A pill head, we call them pill heads. I know that's probably not a great term to use, but their favorite pill is the next one. And I've seen people with my own eyes wake up and spend their day tracing down a pill.
I have too.
And it's hard to be empathetic. I know in my mind they can't help it because they're addicted. I know these substances are addictive, but it's hard to feel empathy for them knowing what they're doing to get these pills. You know what I'm saying? Like the rules are breaking, the laws are breaking, they're stealing off their parents, and it's everybody else's fault. And it's just a sad situation, man. I don't know.
I used to feel the exact same way. And I guess it's been 7 years ago, I had Spinal Fusion. I didn't intend on talking about this tonight. Obviously, this is something you don't know. But I had a Spinal Fusion, and I went through that. Jimmy Don, you saw that process. I mean, I had chronic pain to the point just, I limped when I walked. I walked around with my shoulders up to my ears, didn't sleep. And I went through all these I was getting steroids and getting nerve burnings and going through all these different things. And, I wasn't going to some clinic on the side of the road. I was going through prestigious hospitals, and they, finally said, look, this is, because I didn't want to take any medicine.
Right.
They said, no, this is what you're going to have to do or you're going to be miserable. I ended up going to a doctor, and I was taking pain medicine. I took exactly what I was supposed to take. But the thing with pain medicine is your threshold builds up. The more you take it, it keeps building up. So you would go, and I mean, for me, I was the guy, you had a lot of people there like, okay, well, give me this or bump this up. But, I'm in the doctor, and they're like, hey, do you feel like are you getting any relief? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good, whatever,
Yeah.
They're like, well, I can tell you're in pain. So I guess because I wasn't somebody in there seeking medicine, they would pretty much just write whatever they keep, well, bump up to this, bump up to this. And I never thought anything about it because it did give me comfort. I felt better. I wasn't snorting pills or doing anything. I went to the pharmacy every month and I got my medicine and I took exactly what they gave me. But then we went on vacation one year, and I didn't think anything about it. When you get those types of medicines, they fill them. You have to get them filled every month. We were going on vacation, and we were going to be gone when I was supposed to get it filled. So we go on vacation, and it was 2 days after I was supposed to get my medicine filled. And the last day that we were on our trip, and when we were driving back, I was starting to get sick. Really sick. And it was really a wake-up call for me because I thought, wow, because I've never, I didn't have any kind of mental addiction or anything like that. But I realized my body has been taking this stuff for so long that it needs it. So, we come back to town. Wasn't a big deal. Still didn't think a whole lot about it. And we were going on another vacation, probably a few months down the road or whatever. We were going to be going somewhere else. And the first thing that I looked at was not when can we go on this vacation, when does it fit around my family schedule. The first thing I looked at, because I didn't want to go through that again, is okay, well, I've got to schedule this to where I get my medicine filled before I go on vacation. First thing I looked at. And I did, and I was like, it really woke me up because I don't want anything dictate my life. I sat down with my wife and I said, something's got to happen. Like, what's going to happen now? I was in my mid-30s at the time. Mm-hmm. What's this look like at 50 or 60? My threshold is not going to go down. And for me, I never had a problem. As far as, like I said, I went to the pharmacy. I took what I was supposed to take. I've never snorted a pill or never looked for one. But I had to come to the realization that in reality, even though I'm not mentally addicted to this medicine, if it was cut off, I'm no different than a heroin addict. Right? Because my body has built up. I was taking enough medicine to tranquilize a rhinoceros, right, in a given time. So I made the decision. I said, I'm done. I'm not, if I have to be miserable and be in pain, I've seen too many friends die. I've seen too many, I'm not going to do that. And, I was fortunate enough to go through, I went to my doctor and I said, look, this is what I want to do. I want to quit taking this medicine. And, the first recommendation was, well, we'll wean off and do this. And I said, well, let me ask, is it going to kill me if I quit cold turkey? Well, it's not recommended, and I was just like, that's just me. I'm just not one to delay the inevitable, right? If we're going to quit, let's go through it. And so anyway, I went through that process, and I cannot explain what you go through physically. It's not just about being sick. You don't sleep, cold chills. Things smell different. It's unbelievable. My energy wasn't the same for months. Months. I can remember shortly after that we were trying to close down the swimming pool and Jimmy Don came down to help me. And I'm standing out there and it's hot outside. And this has been a month later. And I just remember standing there thinking, golly, I don't have the energy to do anything. It was a serious process. So the point that I'm making is that I used to not have any sympathy. And I'm not condoning what people do to get drugs, but I understand people not wanting to go through that process because it is not just like, well, you feel a little rough for a couple days and you go back in. I'm talking about, you think about the Walk the Line Johnny Cash movie, him in the bed shaking and sweating, and that is the process that somebody goes through. So I think for me, even just with what the doctor prescribed me going through that process, I can't imagine these people that are taking twice that much and snorting it up their nose and shooting it into their veins.
And we always do the macho thing, talking about how many beers we drunk. And I've heard people brag about how many pills they take, But what people, and to your point, Brad, not only do you build up a tolerance to it, but that also means you're building up your dependency on it. So it's a double-edged sword, man. And it's I've seen a lot of struggles, man.
No, me too. And I remember when Brad went through that. I mean, it was hard to watch because I know Brad.
Right.
He's one of my best friends. And it was hard to watch him go through it, but I know Brad is mentally strong. I know he is. And I knew he would make it through it. But it was still hard to watch him go through it because he was hurting in a bad way. And it was hard. It was just hard to watch him.
There was nothing you could do, right?
There's nothing you could do, man. He just had to go through it and get out of the system. And I will say this, though, is I feel like after it cleared, it got out of the system, I almost feel like he had more energy, but he also changed the way he ate. He almost changed his entire lifestyle to try to not hurt. And I think it worked. I mean, I think as far as he seemed, I think he still has some pain, but I think for the most part, he's gotten himself past that and he was able to get through it.
I started looking after that just into, which you all know I'm a big dork anyway. I'll look into anything to study or read it. But I just thought, there's got to be a better way. Because it all started, I had a car wreck when I was 16. And just gradually it started, it wasn't a big deal at the time. Then started just having these issues and this just went on forever. And just changing diet, just changing the stuff that I ate. I figured out what worked and what didn't work. And, that's been 5 years ago. I don't even I'll take some vitamins. I'll take an aspirin maybe once a month if I've got a headache. I don't take anything. I've not had an injection. I've not been to a doctor for anything pain related in 5 years. And I still deal with pain. I've still got stuff jacked up in my back. I mean, I got a metal plate in my neck. But just making those changes, I'm doing stuff now. I'm in better shape now than I've been since I was 20 years old. But the one thing I will say is that I think the difference is why people do certain, like for me, I went to the doctor. I went to the person I trusted. They said this could fix it. A lot of people, you hear a lot about gateway drugs. And I'm not saying that one thing can't be a gateway into the other. However, like the friends that I grew up with that had serious drug problems, a lot of them, it wasn't that marijuana was a gateway drug into meth. It was just there was easier access to marijuana, right? The doing the drug was just the symptom of the void that they were trying to fill, right. Whether it be drinking or weed or whatever.
I'm in the coal mining industry, and I hurt and pain, all that stuff, but I'm scared to death to take Tylenol, I just don't like it. I don't think people understand how bad it is here. They don't understand how many friends we buried, how many family members we've seen go away. I know I had a root canal a few years ago, and they gave me some pain pills. They prescribed them, and I threw that prescription away. One of the worst mistakes of my life, because I was absolutely. Have you ever had a root canal, man? Woo, it'll light you up. But I'm scared, man.
Well, that's me. I'm scared to death to take anything like that because I'm afraid I'll like it.
Yeah.
And
I know me, man. I like to party.
Well,
if I get to feeling good, I'll do it again. I'll tell you.
Do you remember? And really, this is one of those things. I don't know, it's kind of crazy, but do you remember Lim Bice? He played for Maryland.
Yeah.
And he was going to be the number 1 draft pick by the Boston Celtics. And from all accounts, he never partied, never did anything. And he went out the night, before the draft and snorted a bunch of cocaine and his heart burst. That changed it for me as far as those kinds of drugs. Because it scared me too bad.
Right.
And then you see because like when we were in school, people drank.
Sure.
And if you smoked weed, you were a bad person. Right? That's how it was looked at. Now weed's pretty accepted. Drinking and weed, marijuana probably on the same thing, same levels, the way people view it in most cases. but then it became about the pills.
Yeah.
And this is, Brad shared, and I'll share, this is a story, not quite like that, but it's been 20 years ago. I got a DUI, and I had to go to the DUI classes. And when I was in those DUI classes, this is how long this has been going on. I was the only person in the room, and there were 30 people in this class. I was the only person in the room that was there for alcohol. The only one.
Wow.
Everybody else that was there was for some kind of drug. They got in trouble for drugs. Whether it was a DUI, it was drug related. And they would have these people come in that were at these rehab facilities and talk about their experience, and they were trying to recover and all those things. And I'll never forget this. This lady came in and she said she would have to take 25 Oxycontin a day to feel normal. Wow. To get out of the bed. And I thought, my goodness, what is in that? I have seen friends in the same room snort that stuff, dude, and they just pass out. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it must be the greatest feeling in the world. I don't know, but I mean, they really get on that stuff, man. I said that they have a hard time getting off of it. And it is as much mental as it is physical, or do you think it's
I think at that physical? Point it is a whole lot physical. And I think one thing that happens with these people is, if you have, so your body continues to build up a tolerance. So say that somebody was snorting however many pills every day for so long, then they get arrested, then they go to jail, and they have to detox. So your system resets. So it's not built up to that tolerance, right? Then they have to go through detox. They get back out on the street and they think, well, I was snorting 10 pills before. That same 10 pills, their body's not built up to that anymore. So they take it and it's too much for your system and it kills them. And the other thing that's going on a lot now, which is really scary, is a lot of the actual pills, they're making these aftermarket pills that they're selling on the street that aren't coming from a pharmacy. But they look just like a pill you'd get from a pharmacy, and they have fentanyl in it. Mm-hmm. Now heroin's obviously an issue. And I talked to a good friend a while back about that had a lot of experience with that, but that had went through the heroin thing. And he said, what's happened? These people don't set out to kill themselves, but what happens is they'll take X amount out of a bag and put it on a spoon or whatever, however they do the heroin thing. And that got them to the certain high that they achieved. So the next time, they think, well, that's the amount I used last time. I'm going to use this same amount and get that same buzz. Well, maybe the first time they did it, the way that it was cut was 10%. And the batch they've got now is 90% or what. I don't know how all that works. Right. But it's basically, you don't know how it's cut, so you don't know exactly what you're getting.
And you had that happen really close to home. Cincinnati's not that far away, and you had a series of drug overdoses. People were dying left and right. I'm not even sure how many people actually ended up dying. I want to say 20, 25. That got a bad batch of this stuff, of these pills, and then just OD'd. So we've been talking about this more kind of a personal, local level. Let's kick it up a level. And something JD said, whose fault is it? Is it the doctors? Is it the pharmaceutical companies? Is it the pharmacists? And JD said all the above, which I think is probably correct. Now, the pharmaceutical companies are going to get a lot of press because that's where the money is. They're the guys making billions of dollars. I mean, they paid out a settlement not too long ago that was about as much as their CEO gets paid in a year. So let's start here on the smaller level and work our way up. So my personal opinion is, A, you have to really track the doctors that are prescribing these things. Because the pharmacist can't fill the script unless there's a script to fill.
Sure.
All right? Now, with the pharmacist, and one of my very best friend in the world has been since I was a little kid, Clayton Wells, owns Right Value Pharmacy. And I will tell you that Clayton is a very ethical businessman. And he turns scripts away all the time. All the time. If he's suspicious, or if his pharmacists are suspicious of where that script is coming from, they will turn it away. And I think that's the pharmacy industry's role as far as on the local level, on the retail level. But he will tell you that he'll turn them away, but they'll go right down the street and somebody else will fill them. And we've had 2 local pharmacies. One's Tug Valley, and I can't remember the other. Kermit. This is in Kermit.
Or by Stone Cove.
Yeah. That were shut down.
I know those guys.
And there was like a national story that for the size population, there were more opioids dispensed than anywhere in the country. I think we ranked 22nd in the country, something crazy like that.
Yeah, the pharmacy in Kermit was 22nd in the country among retail pharmacies for hydrocodone purchases. Right, and you think, well, 22nd, that's pretty big numbers. What people that are listening to this show from other states don't understand is Kermit, the population, is about 400 people.
Yeah.
So you can say, well, that number's skewed because of the county. There's multiple people in the county, and those people, but still, 22nd in the country for that small of a population. So what I question is, again, a lot of these, you're seeing these pharmacies getting busted that have deals with doctors and different things. But for most pharmacies, they're not getting the scripts unless they're coming from the doctors. But that's not the only level of this. Because you got the doctors that are writing the prescriptions. They go to the pharmacies. Well, you've got the big pharmaceutical companies that are making these drugs and keep increasing how many of these drugs that they're making. You've also got the distribution companies that are distributing these drugs to these different pharmacies. So you think about, as far as checking the checker, how can that stuff not flagged to a point between 3, 4, 5 different levels? But then you've got, there was one, I think maybe it was New Jersey, that the pharmaceutical reps. Now, I think in the old days, your pharmaceutical reps would either be retired pharmacists or people in the medical field that knew a lot about the medicine. And I've got friends that have been pharmaceutical reps. I'm not saying they're not educated or don't know what they're talking about. But there was a big switch in, I think it was about the 80s, when Purdue was bought out. And they really changed the game. So you had these pharmaceutical reps that were going in these places. And especially when it started with the Oxycontin, where they're getting 5-6 figure bonuses at the end of the year. But I think it was New Jersey where they paid out from the perks from the pharmaceutical companies to the doctors, or the sales reps to the doctors, was $70 million that was distributed amongst a couple hundred doctors. It's crazy.
That's crazy.
It became a sales game. It was no longer about producing a drug that would help somebody feel less pain and would make their quality of life better. It became about the money. It's always about greed and the money.
Well, one of the things that you always hear about pharmaceutical reps is you've never seen an ugly one. That's a job for good-looking people. Really, that's, and it makes a lot of sense. You see these good-looking people in here to push these drugs. When you walk into these doctors' offices, look professional, look nice. I had a buddy who I love dearly, who's been in this game for a long time, the opioid game. He's finally clean now, thank God. He used to tell me his experience going down to Florida to eat pill mills.
Well, they call it the Pillbilly Highway.
Pillbilly Highway. And there was just no oversight at all, from as far as our government was concerned. And I think that's changed now, but what would happen is they would load up 4 or 5 people and they'd drive down there. And you could go to the doctor to get your prescription filled at the same spot. Walk out, go to the next doctor, get you another prescription, get it filled again. And then you come back with, 20, 30 containers of pills and come back and sell them.
Well, and there was a guy, he was my neighbor, he was a state trooper. His job was undercover. And they would go down to Miami in Florida, and he said it would blow your mind how many people from Martin County he would see coming in and out of these doctors' offices.
No way. It's crazy.
And if you take the states with the high, and this is one reason that this is something that means a lot to us here on this show, when we say we're right in the dead center of this, we know that it's going on worldwide. But you're talking about, we're, 5-10 miles from the West Virginia border, right? From 5-10 miles from Kermit, here in eastern Kentucky. And the states with the highest rates of overdose deaths, now this is of 2017. Mm-hmm. West Virginia is number one. 58 people out of every 100,000. You got Ohio that borders us up the road, about an hour. And that specific location in Ohio is one of the worst places on the border with Kentucky, right? 46 out of every 100,000 people. And then you got Pennsylvania and then District of Columbia. And then number 5 on the list is Kentucky with 37 out of every 100,000 people that dies of an overdose. It just seems to me that the way that we handle this is completely different than anything else that we handle, right? If we had a rattlesnake infestation in eastern Kentucky and we had rattlesnakes coming out of the hills everywhere, and you'd say, okay, well, how are we going to stop the rattlesnakes? Well, you'd say, well, okay, well, you're going to build this thing around your yard and it's going to slow down the snakes that come into your yard, okay? And then we're going to do something else to where if you come in contact with them, we're going to give you an education on the best way to deal with these rattlesnakes. Well, last case scenario, we're going to give you the antidote for the snake bite that if you get bit by this bat won't kill you. All that stuff sounds great in theory. We haven't done one thing about limiting the rattlesnakes, right? And then at the end of the day, you figure out the same people that are making money off your barrier in your yard, off of the antidote for the snake bite, that's making money off every one of these levels, is the same people that's bringing truckloads in and dumping the snakes up in the mountains in the first place. Right. Am I making sense what I'm saying there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, as you go through and you look at this stuff, like just watch your commercials. You've got it's at least like a $10 billion a year industry, I think, just for the drugs alone. Well, then, if you get hooked on the drugs, then you've got the medically assisted treatment, which is like the Suboxone and the methadone and those things, which I'm sure we'll get into in a minute.
For sure.
Okay, so then beyond that, now we've got like Narcan that they can shoot these people up with when they're overdosing and keep from dying. Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. That is great that we have such a thing that can save somebody's life. But do you understand the problem? If we're to the point that we have to have that, then we are way past the problem. So if you go through every single one of these steps, I saw, there was a commercial a few years back on the Super Bowl that was for medication for constipation related to opioids. So you go back to everything that I've just talked about. Who is making money off that? The same people. So is there any benefit for the methadone clinic? And if you go to a methadone clinic, have you ever seen one with just one car in the parking lot? And if they built 10 more next week, they are all going to be filled to the gills. So is there any benefit for doctors? And look, there's a lot of great doctors out there. But the point I'm making is there any benefit for the pharmaceutical companies and for the doctors to get these people off drugs? They have lifetime patients. And most people that I know, again, I think that there are probably a lot of instances where people can use these things and there's a benefit to them. Sure. Whether it be, I'm not
people
saying
hurt,
that.
Man. People hurt.
Right.
I mean, pain relief's not bad. That's a good thing.
But I know very few people that have went on Suboxone or methadone that it was a temporary fix to wean them off the process. They ended up just going from this addiction here to going into another addiction here. And maybe I'm way off base. What do you all think?
No. I've seen the same thing. I've also seen the success stories from Suboxone. My good buddy I was talking about that went to the pill mills, he would he had a strip, a Suboxone strip he'd keep in his wallet. he'll tear a little quarter off of it. He'll take it like once every 3 days or something. So that's not, to me, that's much better than being on some opioid. But I've also seen the reverse of that. I've seen people abuse Suboxone. I've seen people sell Suboxone, just like it was a street drug. Mm-hmm. And so we're just way behind this problem. But I want to ask you a question. Why don't we do something about it?
And I think that's the question of the day, because you're talking about in the United States, we are roughly 5% of the population of the world.
Yeah.
We take 99% of the opioids on the planet.
So why don't we fix it? Follow the money. You know why there's no oversight? Follow the money. Guys, it's not a partisan issue. These pharmaceutical companies, it is not happenstance that they contribute so much to these political campaigns. Not Republicans, not Democrats, all of them.
All of them. They're all bought.
All of them are on the payroll. I'm telling you, it's not a partisan issue. Guys, we got to get these corporations out of our politicians' banks.
And it's to the point, just like the banks with it's a too big to fail kind of thing. You had the DEA, who had the biggest drug investigation in the history of the DEA. One of the guys that was running had been at the DEA for 30 years. Had this case. And the attorneys at the DEA basically said, look, we're going to have to settle. We can't go there. We can't take them on. They're too big. And they ended up, and I think you brought this up at the beginning, they ended up fining, I think it was McKesson, big distributor. They fined them $150 million. And everybody's like, oh, well, that's a lot of money. It's less than what their CEO makes in 1 year. So again, I'm not trying to take any responsibility off of people. You have a personal responsibility, even if you get in the mess, to try to fix it. But what my point is I think that a lot of this energy gets directed in the wrong way, and you'll hear everybody say, oh, well, we got to get these crackheads and pillheads and off the streets and whatever. I can promise you one thing. I don't know the answer to the problem, but we will not arrest our way out of this problem.
Hey, amen to that.
That's right.
That's right. And I think, in my opinion, it's the same answer as most problems are. Education is the key. But I don't know how people get so caught up in it. I have a hard time with it because I've seen what it does to people. And I can't imagine going, you know what? That person I met them, they look pretty good. I think I'm going to try that. Yeah, every time I've seen somebody on meth, they look like they're about to die. I don't want no part of that. I see what their life looks like. I don't want no part of that.
And I think, too, as a society, I think both of you have touched on this, and you have done it before, JD, in previous episodes, of how we're being marketed to. Mm-hmm. And kids almost today are being brought up that you go to the doctor for whatever. When I was a kid, you'd have to be dead sick to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
That was the last place you wanted to go. But you go right now and turn it on Nickelodeon or the Disney Channel. Every other commercial is a pharmaceutical commercial. All of them. So the question is, A, why is that being done? We know that's because there's so much money in it. But B, and because a lot of the stuff that we talk about on this show can be a little conspiratorial at times, is there another reason? Are they trying to suppress essentially the American population? We'll talk a lot of times about being sheep. Is there another reason for that? Is to keep us basically in a haze so we don't know what's going on?
I think it's a definite possibility, but I think I can answer the first question. Why are there so many pharmaceutical commercials? And so we talked about this a lot recently. We want to normalize it, guys. Your mama takes pills. She's on blood pressure pills. Ain't no different than, but it is different. It's different. I don't like when extremisms are normalized. You know what I'm saying? That's not a good thing for our society. And
it goes back to even one of the first conversations or a conversation from the last episode that we had about the NBA and the China thing. Why is the media not all over this? You'll see little things. You'll see some things in the back pages. Why is the media not over this? Because the pharmaceutical companies are paying the bills. Right? I mean, you just said it. How many pharmaceutical companies, commercials? And again, it's not just them. I think it trickles all the way down to the doctors. And, my question is, you brought up education. I'm with you 100%. I think that, and this is, I'm really asking the question because I truly don't know. I mean, I think part of fixing it has to be the education part of it. But here's one thing that comes to my mind. When we were kids, when they were trying to educate us on drugs, it was the DARE program. Did you all have that in your schools up here? And basically what the DARE program did was taught everybody which drugs are what, how to get them, and how to use them, right? It was almost like
worked in reverse,
like a prison education on how to do drugs and where to get them and whatever. So again, I don't know the answers, and I'm hoping we can take this from different places and maybe talk to some people in the future that are more experts than we are.
Well, I talk about education. What I'm talking about, I think we need some real talk, and none of this jargon that we've been hearing from the political parties or anybody else. We need some people that's been to the pill mills, had their lives ruined, or buried their best friends. That's what we need. We need our kids need people that, I bet you can find somebody. I know we're going to talk to a guy, and I'm bringing this up now, but we're going to go talk to a guy tomorrow who could really provide some real talk and education, real life education about what drugs could do to you.
And we're going to hear from his spouse who watched him go through this. And this was a good guy, good family that experienced this and found his way through the other side. And I agree. We need to, I agree with you, JD. I mean, I think you don't need talk from politicians. These, whether they've been through it or not, you don't know. If they have, they lie about it. But you need to hear from people. Our kids need to hear from people like, look, if you go into this, but then you've got the guys who starts innocently, who end up hooked on it. And I mean, I don't know how you avoid that is if it's a true physical addiction and it's just that addictive, and it has been pushed on our society. It's been pushed on the middle class. It's been pushed on the lower income folks. It's been pushed and pushed and pushed, man. And I don't know how you get around all that.
And another thing, kind of back to what you were talking about, JD, or Jimmy Don, about what, is there something behind this? And it just clicked when you said that. And I thought about the fentanyl that's coming in. There's been multiple busts here specifically in the last couple of months. And I know there's obviously some conversation. It looks like a lot of that stuff is being pushed from China.
Well, didn't China, like back in the day, weren't they like one of the biggest opioid producers?
Well, you had
right?
I think at least 2 different opium wars in China where they saw firsthand what it can do, how destructive it is to a society. So it would make sense to go after your opponents to push the same thing that you're fully aware of onto another country.
So what we need is somebody with the foresight to say, hey, how did China get out of that? Right? And learn some lessons. Going back to what we talked about earlier, guys, it's not a race thing. It's not a class thing. Addiction's addiction.
Yeah.
And then what we need, and I don't have a bit of research to prove this, but I think that's one reason medical or just marijuana period is still illegal. The pharmaceutical companies do not want medical marijuana to be a thing. They don't want marijuana to be legal.
Because they ain't got the market cornered on that.
Because it's not addictive. You're not going to have to go back to them
That's right.
and fill that prescription every week.
And you could grow it at your house. It's a plant. You can grow it at your home. Or, I mean, they'll end up, there'll be big distributors for that too.
Sure.
In time. But, I've seen marijuana do wonders for people, cancer patients, for Parkinson's, for,
I seen a girl that had she took a lot of seizures. Was it called
Epilepsy.
Epilepsy. And she did the CBD oil. And, did wonders for her. And now we hear these lawmakers, why ain't legal in Kentucky? Oh, we got to do some more research. What do you mean do more research? Marijuana's been around for quite a bit now. All it's going to do is, it may make us a little fatter than what we already are, but hey.
Right.
But with any of this stuff, just like we've been talking about, there is no money in the cure for any of this. Right. So if you stack up all the different levels that we've talked about from who's making money off this, as long as you can continue to treat the symptoms, and I might be wrong about this, and if we've got somebody in the medical field that can give me some information on this, respond on Facebook or whatever, I'd like to hear it. But as far as I know, I don't know that there is a chemical medicine, that there is a pill that treats anything. Right? They all treat
the symptoms.
Treat the symptoms. If you fix these things, then where does it leave all the people involved? There's no benefit. Again, I think most of your doctors are great and well-intentioned. I know most of your pharmacists are great and well-intentioned. But follow the money. Follow the money.
That's always the answer, man. I said it's always going to be greed. These guys these are big, big corporations making a lot of money on the pain and suffering of the population. And there's just something not right about that. And it goes back to that deeper conversation, JD, that you and I've had about healthcare in general.
Sure.
And while that is not a very right thing to think as far as being a right-minded person, I do think that medical care should be provided to every human. If you're sick, you need the right to medical care. And I understand, I've made the argument too, that the for-profit part spawns research and innovation and different things. But when the medicine that's being pushed is ruining lives, maybe we should take a step back and take another look at what we're doing as a society, as ethically, as human. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. The problem is there's still greed out there, though. And these doctors, like right now, these local doctors, I've been making $150,000 a year probably, right? But if you can push, if you become known to prescribe opioids, your salary just went up by leaps and bounds. Right now, you're making $250. Now, I don't know about you, but $100 extra grand a year to me.
Yeah, it ain't gonna hurt nobody, right? I said, and that's money, man. I said that's what the Bible says. It's the root of all evil.
Right.
And it's there's a great American Greed episode. There's two actually. One is about the drug highway from Florida back up to Kentucky.
Right.
There's a guy that lived here. It's a state trooper here that's on that American Greed episode.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, married the girl I graduated high school with, and he's on there talking about that. And then there's another one where these guys actually in Florida had a facility where they had doctors' offices, different doctors lined up in the facility, like 20, 25 different doctors. They would take turns going and seeing them, and then they'd walk right through the next door to the pharmacy, and it would already be ready for them.
My buddy says he went to the pill mill in Florida and didn't even see the doctor. The doctor was like on a beach or something, FaceTiming him. And that's how he got his prescription. That's insane.
And I think one of the biggest illusions that we're going to see is, and there's one good thing I'll say in the last couple of years, there's a lot of people getting busted. There's a lot of pill mills getting busted. There was another Department of Justice, something, the Appalachian, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was opioid related. There is something happening. We'll see what it looks like on the other side or how big it is, but there's a lot of people getting busted. But I think as this stuff gets peeled back, that we'll see that one of the biggest illusions that we have as a society is we think about the drug dealers and the gangsters as being, we watch a movie and it tells us these people, whether it's the mafia or whether it's a gang or whether these are the drug dealers. That's the minor leagues.
Oh yeah.
Right?
For sure.
The pros at this are the pharmaceutical companies, the politicians. And I think that once people start figuring that out, that we can kind of open Pandora's box there and really start coming closer to some solutions.
I hope so, man. I said I've seen what it's done here. I mean, I've just seen what it's done here, man. I said it's just unbelievable, the destruction that leaves in its wake.
It's frustrating is what it is. For me, see guys that, you grew up with, and you're like, man, what have you been to? I've been clean for 2 months. Then you see them 6 months later, they've been clean for 2 months again. They don't have no idea that they seen you. They forgot, because they were so blown in the creek.
And it's not them. You know what I mean? It's not the actual person. Like you're talking to them, you're looking at them, and you're just staring through a different set of eyeballs. It is not the person. They're not recognizable, and it's just truly not them. And it's so sad.
I tell you what's sad is to watch these people leech off their loved ones.
Yeah.
I know people who, late 40s, early 50s, still live in a home and still blaming mommy for my drug addiction. I'm going to push another book on you. It's called Boundaries. And this guy, man, he writes this, I can't remember his name right now, but he tells a story of a young guy, and his parents were trying to get him treatment. And so the parents go to this guy's a psychiatrist. He goes, but our son says he doesn't have a drug problem. He said, well, tell me what's going on. He goes, well, I always have to give him money for drugs. I always have to let him use my card. He's always getting in trouble. Listen. He goes, well, I agree with your son. She goes, what do you mean you agree with my son? Your son doesn't have a drug problem. You've got one. You're the one that's having to pay the price for his drug addiction. You've got the problem. He don't have no problem. He don't have nothing to lose. The book's called Boundaries, by the way, if you want to check it out. It's really out.
And, you think about that with you. What is it, like 1 in 6 families are dealing with that in some capacity now as far as drug-related issues. And, you've obviously got the people that are addicted that are dealing with that. But think about the other side of that, of the people that are living with that. The loved ones, the people that you have to sit there, and it's almost like you're sitting and you're watching somebody. I had a couple friends like this. It's like you're watching them. Yeah. They're laying on the railroad tracks, and the train's coming, and you're smacking them, and you're trying to wake them up, and you're yelling at them, get out of the way, and you can't do anything about it.
What scares me to death is to think of my children.
I know, man.
Me too. They're a car wreck or a freak accident away, a ball game from this being a real possibility, guys. And it's scary. It's scary.
Because a lot of the friends I have, man, that are hooked on that stuff are people that I knew had families just like me.
So, with that being said, then let me ask you this. We depend a lot on other people to educate our children. So your kids leave the house in the morning. Right on Monday morning, you take your kids to school at 8 o'clock. They're with somebody else for 8 hours. And then they come home, and then they might have homework for an hour. And you spend a little bit of time with them. How many of these conversations are people having with their kids? I don't know what the right age is. I'm really not sure, but I think it needs to be early.
Right.
How many kids do you think have had face-to-face conversations with their parents sitting in front of them and telling them stories and educating them on some of these problems? Or do you think as parents, a lot of these topics you're pushing off for somebody else to teach your kids about something that not only affects them, but affects the whole family?
I know I've started having the conversation with Ashton because she's going to high school next year. I remember what it was like when I was coming up, and that's when those things become a little more prevalent in middle school. I'm sure that stuff's around, or you've got kids that have pretty bad home lives and are seeing a lot worse. But I think as far as where they might start experimenting a little bit, it's what my dad always used to tell me. He said, I was like, Ashton was a child, and I was a wildcat, and I was like, Dad, how do you have this conversation? He said, look, son, he said, you tell them the best you can what right from wrong is. You try to have that conversation, and you love them as hard as you can, and then hope like hell they live through their 20s. He said, that's what I did with you. Yeah. He said, because like I said, he did for himself. It's what his mom did for him. He was as ornery as I was, Sure. And you just try to share those experiences. And I feel like a lot of times parents don't feel like they're trying to insulate their kids. And they don't want them to know that, hey, Dad did, kind of the same thing back in the day, and I've taken a little different approach.
Well, I have too with Chase, and of course he's a senior in high school. He's about to go out to the real world, but it's still tough, man. Like, you hope he makes the right decisions, but you got to be there if you don't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's right. I said it's just really scary raising kids, man, in this time and the things that are out there. And you're right, man. A car wreck, a freak accident, you're that close.
And it's important. Yeah, too. And I think with, that relationship, because I try to think like my dad, which I've got an awesome relationship with my dad. But, he was a strict guy about a lot of stuff. He was very particular about what we did and how we acted and what we did, and he would get in your business in a second if you stepped out of line. However, it's been completely different than with a lot of my friends. We're freaking out thinking, okay, I'm going to get in trouble because I've done this or done this, and man, my dad is going to flip out. Now, as strict as my dad was about certain things, he's phone call number one.
Right.
And that is something for me personally that I want to pass to my kids, is because if I'm ever in trouble, now little piddly things, I screw up and I'm like, oh no, I don't want to call Dad, or I don't want him to know he's going to jump my case about this.
Yeah.
Big problems, always phone call number one. And that makes a huge difference, I think, just with kids of having the support of their parents, even though they're going to keep them in line, to know, hey, look, if I got a problem, I can go to them, I can talk to them, I can get help.
I feel like I've done that with my kids, and I think my kids seem to be turning out well. We'll see how it goes, but I've always told them we can handle anything but a lie. If you lie to me, I can't help you. I don't have the information. Just be honest with me. We'll work through whatever we have to work through. If you lie to me, I can't help you.
Yeah, and that's what I've been trying to do with Ashton. I've just started to have that conversation. I've had the conversation, and she hates it. She's
Sure.
13. She hates it. Shut up, Dad. But it's important to me, and that's what I tell her is, no, you listen, this is important to me. Right. And we have started about drugs. Some of the things I've seen. Well, she kind of got to see it firsthand with my cousin who lived next door. Right. They were like, oh my God. I said, well, that's what can happen if you go down that road.
That's what that life looks like.
Right. And I've also, too, trying to help her understand what she's seeing on TV. There's a business behind this. There's a reason they push this stuff. And it's a hard conversation to have. It really is. Because, number one, they're 13, And as we talked on previous episodes, but it's almost like you just got to keep pounding that home. And because I say the same stuff over and over, they get aggravated with me because roll their eyes at you, that kind of thing. But, that as far as what we can do or how you fix it, I think for us, it kind of starts there at home. You do the best you can, as my old man said, you teach them the best you can right from wrong and love them.
And it's one of the reasons I coach, too. I think I told you this before. Mm-hmm. But, a lot of these kids don't have the great home lives, man. And it's important they have positive role models. I'm not saying I'm a role model, but I think I definitely have some pull over these kids. I think some of them look up to me,
And if anything, they have somebody they know they can go talk to.
Absolutely right. Homecoming was a few weeks ago, and one of the things that we told them, hey, you guys be safe. If you get out and do something crazy, don't get out and do nothing crazy. We're a phone call away, guys. And we mean it. It's important. Some of these kids don't have that, man. And
that too, maybe that's part of the issue too, is just the breakdown of the family.
Sure, I'm sure it is.
That could be part of the problem. I know living here, we joke a lot. When we were in school, there wasn't a whole lot to do. That's why there's so many famous musicians come from Eastern Kentucky, is because they ain't got nothing else to do, so they play instruments. We'd fight and chew skull and then go drink. There wasn't a whole lot else to do, and that could be part of it too. I don't know. There's just so many variables, man. And I said it's such a hard conversation to have, and I think it's important that we're having this conversation, because I think it'll just listen to JD talk just now gave me some ideas, some things to talk to my kids about, and the way to approach it, and maybe somebody listening to us will feel the same way. And I think when you look at it from just a national level, understand what it is. It's a sales pitch. It's about making money. Where did we go wrong morally as a nation to where that's just okay?
Well, I think And it goes back to a lot of the problems we have. Guys, I remember being in elementary school and thinking, if my mom has to come to this school, I am going to get absolutely murdered. She will kill me. I was scared of my mom. No, I am scared of my mom. But we've seen such a flip in our society that now we want to blame other people instead of, guys, my kids ain't perfect. And your kids ain't, and your kids ain't. And I don't know what happened in our society when we stopped blaming our kids or making our kids take responsibility. But I swear, I think this has a big impact on this conversation, and that we want to pass the responsibility on to other people instead of putting responsibility where it belongs on some levels with the individual.
And I think the other thing with that too is that we spend a lot of time waiting for somebody to fix this 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 levels up. I think this is an issue that is going to have to be resolved. It's going to have to start in the community. It has to start here. It has to start at the local level. We piss and moan and we talk about what these representatives are doing or why this person's not passing a law or whatever. But what's going on in our community here? Because if we work on this and the next community besides us works on that,
maybe to make a difference. Well, I mean, one of the things, the guy that we're going to interview, the company that he works for, is called Addiction Recovery Care. And pretty much all their employees are people who have recovered from drug addiction and now work for the company.
Who are recovering.
Yeah, and are recovering.
Yeah.
And I think what those guys are doing, I think is very important. It kind of goes back to the education. Mm-hmm. The people who are, I financed a house for a guy. I financed a lot of people that work for there, that work there.
Sure.
And they've told me their stories. And I've worked as hard as I could to help those people make that next step. And it's just pretty impressive what that company's got going on. And I think we'll hear a lot from the guy we interview about what it's done for his life. And I think what Brad's saying, it goes to his point, is we try to start locally.
Sure, absolutely.
And I think those guys are really doing a good job with that.
And I love, I follow Matt on Facebook, Matt Brown, on Facebook. Me and him graduated together, good friends always. And he shares these stories these people have, man. They're amazing. I always read them. It's so inspiring. And I think if it doesn't do anything else, it gives people hope. A place like Addiction Recovery Care is a beacon of hope in this community, I think. I know there's people out there that has bad things to say about them. That's fine. They're entitled to their opinion. Don't care. But whatever you got to do to get off these opioids, these drugs, whatever, you got to do it. If it's Jesus, if it's basketball, if it's football, whatever, I don't care. But I'm thankful for a company like Addiction Recovery Care.
Me too, man.
And people like Matt and his wife.
Me too, Matt and his wife. I said Tim Robinson, who's the CEO, the kind of the founder of that, was in school when I was, and they're doing good work, man. And I'm interested to hear that conversation with Matt. So, guys, this is an important conversation. I'm glad we're having it. I really am. And it's probably a little more serious than what we normally do. We talk about a lot of current event stuff, but I think, as I said when we started the show, this is just something that we feel like, especially where we live, that this is something we need to have a conversation about, and hopefully somebody listening can take something from it. And so we're going to wrap this one up. From me, Jimmy Don, JD Dameron, Brad Broaddus, we appreciate you guys listening. This is the Just Add Bourbon podcast.